Ladies and gentlemen, as we observe World Cancer Day, we would like to share with you this very important and interesting podcast with Dr. Caleb Harris, who is the additional professor and head of department of surgical oncology at the Northeastern Indira Gandhi Regional Institute of Health and Medical Science. If you like podcasts like these, kindly like, share, and subscribe to our different social media platforms that is given in the description below. Welcome, Dr. Caleb. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Dr. Caleb, there are many times when people dread this word called cancer. And as someone who has come into this field, could you kindly first explain to us what is surgical oncology, the field that you're working in, and perhaps can you explain to us what are the different types of oncologies that we have?
Yeah, thank you. So generally, cancer is treated in a multidisciplinary way.
Sure.
Meaning experts from different branches will get together. We usually sit together, we plan the treatment for each and every patient of ours, and that is how we go about it. And they say there are 3 different ways to treat cancer. One is to poison the person, and the other one is to burn the person, and the third one is to do butchery. So I'm the butcher here, meaning a surgical oncologist is somebody who does radical procedures, we call it, as in we remove major parts of the body. So that is what we call as a surgical oncologist. I treat cancer with surgery. Whereas a radiation oncologist who is somebody who uses radiation for treating. And the medical oncologist is the one who gives chemotherapy, which is kind of a poison in a different dose, in varying doses, I would say. So that is how cancer is dealt with.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is cancer is a disease where you have at times have to kind of harm a person so that he can get better.
Yes, I won't say put it as harming somebody.
Okay.
It is just that the kind of procedures we do, the kind of treatments we give, have a lot of side effects. However, of late, the focus has been on quality of life. Now that with the advent of recent treatments, the life of the patient is extended. And so we are thinking a lot about quality of life.
I see.
So, for example, earlier days when somebody developed a breast cancer, the treatment was like remove the entire breast completely. Whereas now we just remove part of only the tumor along with some normal tissue around it, and we give radiotherapy along with it, and that obviates the need to remove the entire breast. So that is one of the examples.
I see. And it just reminds me of the fact, back in 2019, my dad was also diagnosed of, an intestinal cancer. And at that first glance, we thought that this was a very dreaded disease. We don't know what was to be expected of, this disease. But as you just said, some kind of procedure had to be done so that my dad could be better. And of course, he went for surgery. And by God's grace, now he's doing much, much better now. And we can say that he's cancer-free for now. And I think that there are some at times when you have to treat patients in such a way so that they can be better. So I think with this disease, do you at times feel depressed, working in oncology, and particularly when your patients die or your patients are on the verge of death, how do you feel as a doctor who treats such people?
Yeah, of course, it always is a very hard feeling when a patient whom I've treated has died. But generally, I usually don't feel really bad if somebody has lived his life and the cancer has taken its course. That's okay. Of course, we feel really bad if something happens, our treatment is not really successful. Say, for example, after a surgery which I've done, patient develops a complication and dies, which could have been treated in some other way, then we'll feel a bit bad. But otherwise, I really don't feel bad. And people do ask me this question, hey, as an oncologist, all your patients die, they say. But then I think that is far from the truth. Like, for example, what you shared just now, like your dad. So your dad has made it through despite he's into his 80s, right?
Yes.
And despite it all, and having a lot of other associated comorbidities, as in other diseases along with it, still he's made it. That itself is living proof that cancer is not as dreaded as it once was. Maybe once it happens in your family, then once you have a good experience, probably people will learn that it is not as bad as it. However, when I'm sitting in my OPD and talking to a patient, many times I see the moment I tell that the diagnosis of cancer is confirmed, I look at them and then they are already teary-eyed.
Yeah.
So usually I tell them, see, everybody has a risk. As in, you walk outside your house. I even tell them, see, I can even, while climbing down the staircase from my OPD is on the second floor. While climbing down the staircase, I can slip and fall. And even that can result in death. Or for that matter, driving on the roads. See, living in Shillong, maybe the first time when I climbed up, came on the road,
Yeah.
I was wondering, when will my vehicle fall down, slip and fall? But then over time, we are getting used to it. It's something like that, I guess.
Yeah.
So now when I'm dealing with cancer patients, more and more cancer patients, of course, there are some cancers, patients come in a late stage or a very bad cancer disease by itself. Then, of course, it is risky. But then for everything, there is a data. We know like a reasonable amount, like what will be the expected life for the person. And that kind of stratification we do have. So it isn't like as bad as we think it is. And I'm sure not depressed by treating cancer patients. Because, of course, the risk may be there, but I don't think the risk is that high. There are much more dreaded things like accidents and heart attacks and other things also equally bad.
So what you're basically saying is that, that as a doctor, you're there to actually help them out. They know they've been diagnosed with this disease, but you're actually there to help them through this disease as well.
Yeah.
So irrespective of all the risk that is involved, you're there to help them, and you're someone who can actually help them as well. And I think that in itself is such a blessing as well. And, as a doctor, you've just shared some of your experiences just now, but I want to just push you a little further over here and ask you a very, very personal question. How do you feel when your patients, when they've been diagnosed with this disease, they're sitting there in your OPD, they're teary-eyed, they're feeling sad, and what is the first thing that actually pops up in your mind when you've actually shared them about the disease that they have? And if they were supposed to ask you, as someone who believes in a God, could this be the result of a faulty design?
When it comes to this aspect of design, cancer is there is a balance between immortality and cell destruction in the body. As in, there is something called as telomeres in the body, so which maintain the life cycle of each and every cell. So beyond a certain level, each of the many cells in the body undergo cell division. Say, for example, our intestinal cells, every 3 to 4 days, the entire lining of the intestines will be replaced. Our skin, maybe once a month, the cells on the skin, they get replaced. So there is a lot of cell division in our body. Like we all understand that hair also keeps falling, but it keeps growing up. Of course, for some people, it stops beyond a certain period.
I'm getting there, by the way. Just kidding.
So this cell division is integral to the body. But beyond a certain level, it stops. But in cancerous cells, there is an alternation there, and the cell tries to attain immortality. And that is when a cancerous tumor develops in the body. And a lot of cells can get into this cancerous nature. But then there are defense mechanisms in the body, and there is a mechanism for repairing these defects. But then when the ability of the body to repair, when that gets overwhelmed, that is when cancer happens. So it is, I think there are a lot of defense mechanisms in the body, and had it not been for these defense mechanisms, then a lot of cancers would develop. But it's surprising that despite so much of insults happening to the body, like we see so much of environmental changes, so much of exposure to a lot of radiation. Even the sun gives a lot of radiation which is harmful, but then we don't develop that much of cancers. For example, in the Western world, people develop a lot of skin cancers. In India, we hardly see those cancers, probably because we have a bit more of melanin. I have a little bit more than you, I guess. So that also helps to protect. Similarly, despite the fact that a lot of tobacco is used, a lot of betel nut and alcohol, all these things, these carcinogens, so the body gets overwhelmed. So the body may not have been designed for such a state originally. So I won't say it is a faulty design. I would say it's a good design, but then every design has its own limitations. So we have to understand that.
I see. So, as a medical doctor who has, seen a lot of patients, what would your advice be to such a patient? For example, someone we know, or someone who's listening to this podcast, might be in the future diagnosed with this disease. How, as a doctor, would you help him, or help out his thinking in such a way that he would cope up with this disease?
Yeah, I know we are. It's a reasons podcast.
Yeah.
But then I wish to reiterate that we may not be always be able to give a reason for everything in life.
Yeah.
So just to remind from the Bible, so when Jesus and his disciples came across the blind man, and the disciples asked him, immediately the disciples wanted a reason. Why is this man born blind? Was it because of his sin or his parents' sin? But then Jesus gave an entirely unexpected answer. He said that the glory of God may be revealed. So I think we need to remember that it may not be possible in every patient to give a reason. For example, many of my patients, but surprisingly, it's easy for me to tell, because in Meghalaya, when I'm sitting and treating patients, 90% of our patients, I can tell a reason. Because majority of them would have used either tobacco or betel nut or alcohol.
Yeah.
And there is a very clear reason behind it. But then when a patient comes, I don't even talk about the reason.
Okay.
Of course, we when we ask the patient the details, we call it as a history. We note down the details, how much of alcohol or tobacco or betel nut the person has taken. But we are not going to tell, hey, it's because this cancer is because of your betel nut. So at that point in time, nobody is asking the reason, because by the time I tell him the diagnosis, the person is not interested in knowing why he had it, because probably they know it. So sometimes reasons may not always matter.
Yeah.
So that we need to keep in mind.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And, there are so many philosophers and thinkers out there who are actually saying, when they witness a child or a young man, suffering from this disease, they would say that if there is a God, and this God is all powerful, all loving, and, all knowing, and so on and so forth, God is an unjust God in allowing children to actually have this disease. What would your response to this be?
Yeah, so you are right in a way to say that when children develop cancer, what causes do they show? A lot of them have be due to genetic reasons, because there may be something familial, something which they have inherited from their parents. That is true. I agree with you. But then we have to understand that when you have a system, there are always few errors which creep in. Unless you have a system like that, the system won't develop. So the human body is designed such that cell division is integral. And we have so many millions and billions of cell divisions happening every day. There is bound to be a few errors. And that is why we have to understand this process. So without cell division, you cannot have a refinement of the human genome. And this human genome keeps refining itself on a regular basis. And that is really integral. So when it comes to children, of course, it is due to some error in the genetics of maybe it is inherited, transmitted from the parents to the child. But then what is the other alternative we have to this? So I'll give you an example from one of my patients. She's been following up with me for the past maybe 3-4 years. She is actually not diagnosed with cancer herself. But then there is always a suspicion, and we keep running a battery of tests to find out if she has already developed cancer and try to pick it up on an earlier basis. We call it as a screening. So we are screening her because she has an elder sister who has already developed multiple cancers. And the first cancer was developed when, say, probably around 12 or 13 years of age. And now she is still harboring many cancers. And other family members in her family also had cancers, because she is diagnosed with a genetic or syndrome called, which is known to cause high cancers. But then, if you look at it, she is a hugely successful a social media influencer and an entertainer. And I don't want to give further details. You might be able to guess the person who she is. So in the eyes of the world, you might think that, oh, this person has a cancer, so this person is not of much benefit to the society. But then look at the person. She is a great positive influence to the society. And that is something which you need to look into. So the world looks at you as okay, a person has to be perfect. The person should not have any disease. But what about the deceased? The alternate to to this is, if you need to have no cancers, then probably these people should have to be born at all. Those cells at maybe in the zygote stage it should have resulted in an abortion, or this person would have born as a stillborn fetus, and that is what the world thinks. But then we will be moving on towards eugenics. So here, this person, even though she is harboring the genes which may result in cancer at some point in time, so the genetic testing is already done. It's a matter of time wherein she will develop cancer. But then she is a positive influence of the society. And you might miss out if you look to see, if you keep telling that, no, I want a world without cancer, we might be missing out on such people. So that is something which we need to keep in mind.
I see. And would God be unjust in allowing these children to have this cancer is a question that a lot of thinkers have been thinking about as well. And, when I think about this question, there was one quote that I actually, or rather to paraphrase someone who quoted this, he actually said, God would be unjust if he only allowed that child to suffer with this cancer in this world had he not promised an eternal life where there will be no more suffering. God actually justifies himself in actually creating a new world where there will be no more cancer, no more pain. Yeah. And that is why God is actually just in allowing us to go through all of these so that we can actually empathize with those that are suffering with them as well. Yeah. And I think your response was brilliant as well. Just coming to a technical side, Dr. Caleb, what I would always like to know is, as someone who's also from the science background is, cancer research is actually coming up. The precision of our medicine was also, becoming more precise. So do you think that in a few years' time, cancer would be a thing of the past where there will be no more cancer in the future?
I won't say there won't be any cancer. But then this has already happened with many diseases. Even the other day I was talking to a patient. So she is hardly around maybe 35, 36. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 of a lung cancer, which earlier days we used to expect only some around 6 to 9 months of survival. But since she's made it more than 2 years now already, and she's doing pretty well. And she's even working on a daily basis. She's also in the healthcare industry, and she's doing pretty well. So cancer might become like a chronic disease. So there are several other cancers like prostate cancer and even breast cancer. People, even after being diagnosed with stage 4 cancers, many times people even live for 5 years, which is almost considered cured of cancer. So with the advent of precision medicine, maybe, yes, a little bit of the side effects might come down. So sometimes patients die out of the side effects of treatment. Say if somebody gets a chemotherapy and patient might die of the chemotherapy. So that those side effects are coming down, and cancer might become like any other disease. So I don't understand why people always think that oncology is a bad field to be in. But even if somebody has a kidney failure, for example, end-stage renal disease, that also carries a poor prognosis. So probably like that. And people might be on dialysis throughout their lives. So similar to that, cancer also might be converted into a chronic disease like that. It has already happened for certain cancers. Of course, maybe in future, some more cancers may join the bandwagon.
I see. So do you think that, with all of these researches in medicine coming up, do you think that the life expectancy of the average human being would cross 100 in some point in the future as well?
So we always have hope, and we are working towards that. Of course, it has happened. Probably we are always looking up to the Japanese. They always reach such goals earlier. But then we always have to remember that there are always limitations to what human knowledge and intelligence can achieve. And the world was humbled during the COVID period, wherein when you look at it now, we always feel like, it might even sound funny as to what all things happened during COVID, all those lockdowns and quarantines and all those things. So there are limitations to it. because diseases come up in different ways, and maybe we are all working towards that, but I'm not sure if that is really achievable.
Sure. And thank you so much, Dr. Caleb, for your wonderful insights as well. So, Dr. Caleb, following up on that question, you just said that there are some things that you've achieved where certain cancers have become a chronic disease. Do you think that there'll become a point in the future where all cancers will become a chronic disease, and how or when, or maybe could you predict for us if that could be achievable?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and that is what is the hope of all cancer professionals and researchers. I'm also involved in a few research projects. So that is what we all dream of. But then the more we research, we feel that there are limitations to what we can achieve. Say, for example, in breast cancer, that has been a lot of molecular basis of breast cancer has been understood a lot. So much that even anytime anybody who goes to the doctor today, in most of the centers, even in our center, we do the molecular analysis and we find out, we classify the patient not just based on the stage. So thanks to the movies, everybody knows that, okay, it's stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is slowly becoming a thing of the past for breast cancer. Of course, we still use that stage, but more important than the stage is the molecular molecular classification of the tumor. And so there we've identified that, okay, if a person has a good molecular type, this patient can do better. Even if the patient has a advanced stage 3 or stage 4 also, then the way we do the treatment can vary. So those are the patients who can be the ones whose disease is converted into a chronic disease. But it may not be the same with people with a poor molecular biology. So that's what is most important, understanding the biology of the disease. So we've understood the biology I would say we are trying to understand the biology for certain cancers, but there are a lot more cancers which we have not understood well.
Sure.
So just when I think that, okay, I've operated well, I've done this, that, even when I've figured out everything, still there is always a setback. So there is always the X factor which we don't understand. And it's important for us to understand the limitations, because that comes in very handy when I counsel a patient. So I'll tell the patient, of course, we treat so many cancers of the same type in this year, and we are a high volume center for this. Our results are really good, but we can never ever assure you that 100% the success is guaranteed. So that is a limitation which we always have, and I'm not sure whether we'll be able to come up with solutions to everything very soon.
So, Dr. Caleb, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It has been an amazing talk, and I've learned so much through this podcast as well. And ladies and gentlemen, if you liked this podcast, kindly like and share to your friends, family, and especially those who are vulnerable to this disease or who are going through this disease as well. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Caleb Harris. And as we are observing World Cancer Day, Dr. Caleb Harris, I would like you to share with us if there are any preventable measures which we as individuals can take so that we can prevent the development of cancer, if at all, if it is preventable.
Thank you for that question, Zwala, because that is something very close to me. Because apart from doing my job as a surgical oncologist, I'm also involved in a lot of awareness activities against cancer. Because sitting in my OPD, I feel that most of the work I'm doing can be avoided, provided people would not have used certain products like tobacco, which is the number one cause for cancer in India, and alcohol and betel nut. And these are the main causes. Apart from these, even things like our food habits also, taking too much of sugars, leading to obesity, or not having adequate exercises, and also with regard to the kind of adding vegetables and other fresh fruits. So these are all important causes which can result in cancer. So having said this, I'm reminded of the advice which God talks about in the Bible. So Paul says, do you not know that your body is the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells in you? So if we ask ourselves every day, then probably we will not defile our bodies. and the world finds it very difficult. Today, if I talk about this, many places people aren't very happy to hear about this because they feel that, oh, what is wrong in doing this? And it is considered as being very cool to use these products. So that is something which we need to remember, that if we are following these principles, we keep reminding ourselves every day that we have to honor our bodies as if it's the temple of God, then probably our whole lives will change. And we will leave that message to you on this World Cancer Day. And I hope that this will impact your lives in future. Thank you.